Welcome to episode 3 of the AMPS Studio podcast. My name is Craig Sheridan. I'm a senior engineer and music technology trainer at ampstudio.com. I'm also the skills support coach for givenhandsmusic.com. I'm with Sean McDonald, songwriter and music producer for the band Search Party and station manager at radioymp.com. Before the world changed, we engineered the recording and mixing sessions at AMPS Studio, and now we're removed from the studio space to our homes. So this podcast is for us music heads to get a catch up and exchange technique and exchange tips and talk about plugins and all manner of things that entertain and interest us to do with music production. We're on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, you name it, we're streaming on it, and catch us where you can. If you have any music production related questions, you can send them to craig@ampstudio.com or leave a comment wherever you find this podcast. I was talking to Jack during the week, and Jack had said that sometimes he listens to the Blind Boy podcast, and he says one of the things that he does, sometimes he talks about the music, but he talks about it from this is what an explanation point of view more than a technical point of view, just to kind of demystify the process.
As you said, demystify what they are, like something like, AI mixing, all the Izotope stuff, or all the auto-tune type things, not exactly going in and showing people how you use it, but just explaining what they are and how they operate, you know.
So this is another tool that you need to be aware of rather than this is how to use the tool. So well, that's a very accessible option, because even for people who are down the line and mixing and have done a lot of mixing, there's always new technology coming out that you have to relearn and to skill up on. And
when I saw all that stuff, like all the Izotope stuff, I was like, how the hell does that work? Or, will that be any good, or what, what? So when it took me a while to actually look into that and see like what way that works and how I could filter that into mine.
Did you use it?
I do use it. I sort of use especially Ozone for like a starting point. When I'm like sort of finishing a project, is to sort of get an idea where it's going to end up, if you know what I mean. So I know, right, that's what way that's going to come out in the master, like around that sort of thing. So to go back then and say I need to
fix the mix there,
so just to give me an idea.
I have the Izotope suite actually, so I used Neutron kind of extensively to try and work out how I could use it, and it works very well as a channel strip to give you a sense. It makes everything seem more open and more clear and less cluttered. And one thing I always thought though is I wouldn't have arrived at that myself. That's not my taste. That's it's doing a better job than I may do in some things, but that's not how I would place that thing in the mix anyway. So it's always that double-edged sword of if I do use this, it'll put me to a certain place that I wouldn't have got to make my own decisions. And sometimes that's good and sometimes it's bad, because then sometimes it leads me down a road that I haven't supported so far, and sometimes throws up more options or a different direction and kind of derails the mix sometimes. It is a very interesting concept. And I did do one mix one time where I put it on all channels and just hit auto and seeing how it worked out. And it was
that's actually like that's what that one's meant for, isn't it? Like to use it with RX and just to let it go across all the channels. But most people I've seen use it, on YouTube and stuff, have seen to use it in that channel strip setting as well. It's sort of like a dad plan for your tracks. Just slims everything down.
And I suppose that gives you that very kind of contemporary and open sound, if that's what you're going for. So if you're making kind of future-based pop, then sweet, go for it. But I always think a wee bit of kind of harmonic saturation and distortion and making it sound a bit more kind of grungy in certain places. And even though I have it, I very seldom use it, because I have other channel strips. Like if I'm in mix mode, then that channel strip is not the channel strip that gets me the character that I want for the end of the mix, if that makes sense. So my most frequently used channel strip is the SSLE series from Waves. It doesn't take hardly any resource, and the EQ on it sounds fantastic, and the compressor is just enough to keep things in check, and the more you use it, the quicker you get a sound out of it. I remember doing a coaching session with a fellow one time, and he had a drum kit and two EQ moves, and this whole drum kit sounded completely different. There was weight in the kick and there was crack in the snare, and it completely changed the whole concept of his drums, and he was delighted with it. Although that only took about 3 minutes, so I had to kind of fill the next 7 minutes explaining why I had done that, just to kind of justify time. But that SSL channel is absolutely outstanding. What would be your channel strip then? What do you use?
I don't know. I sort of go through. I probably shouldn't because it takes up a lot of CPU, but I just sort of have really filled up inserts,
Right.
like, but I try and do as little processing as possible at the same time.
Right.
So at times I have loaded up one of those channel strip inserts just to have the whole lot, but I also like having more control with the EQ, so I like using fab filter stuff. Having that dynamic EQ and stuff. So then using that with the channel strip as well is going to be like massive, like bulky, like drain on power. So if I just need a bit of tightness and then a bit more control over the EQ, then I'll just use the fab filter, and anything else, anything extra then in on top of that. But then if it's something else, then if I need to do a lot to it, then yes, I'll open up like a channel strip plugin on that. Yes, that SSL one from Waves is good. What other ones? But I think for the most part, as it says, I would open up like a compressor from one place, and then use like just a channel EQ on Logic. Use a different reverb, use a different delay, and I end up always having the thing freeze on me. But
that's how you know you're getting enough answers.
Down the line.
Yeah, and I remember working in a similar way, but I often find that in the circumstance where I'm doing that, where I'm loading up every slot in the plugin, it's because I'm sound designing, or I'm trying to get a tone, or I'm trying to get the sound to a place. So I'm not necessarily in that mixing mode yet. I'm still in the kind of creative zone, and that's why the whole kind of separating them two things was a feature of the last podcast too, because oftentimes if you go to mix that and you're already maxed out, well, you can't mix it, so you have to bounce it out anyway. But I find if you're doing that much work to a sound where you're covering 3 or 4 bases with different plugins, then you're still sculpting the sound to where you want to hear it, rather than it being a finished sound ready to mix. But and that's the thing about the AI type stuff, because it's there as an assist, so it's there to kind of start. It's a good kind of starting point, but it doesn't give me character. It helps me clean out unwanted stuff. So it's handy if you're on the third check. It's almost like a pre-mix assistant, in my opinion, where I can get you to a place where you can analyze what's going on without having to spend the time to go through it. Obviously, you're going to have to spend the time afterwards to make sure it's not doing anything to take away from the quality. But 9 times out of 10, it makes things sound more open and spacious and lighter and less bulky anyway. Like you said, at that plan, I thought that was brilliant.
Yeah, and especially with vocals as well. Vocals are one of them things that it's hard to get the sound that's in your head to come through, and a lot of those AI assisted ones are good at, if you're working on vocals and putting too much time into it, then you can go that they're basing that that mix that they're putting on, that process, on thousands of other recordings. So if you've got this idea in your head, more than likely it's going to be close to a popular recording of before. So if you're loading that up onto your vocal track, if you're not getting anywhere with it, and that's often the place I find myself in, is loading up like a modern type sound on the vocals, and then seeing what they have done to it. It'll show you what type of EQ it's added, what type of whether it was an optical compressor or whatever, or whether they're putting some sort of tube saturation on it.
Mhm.
and you're sort of getting to tinker each wee bit of that, or you can just go and put your own sort of just recreate what they've done and add your own sort of spice to it, which is handy.
Yes. Um, Absolutely. So we get into a wee bit about AI there. Also on my list of things to talk about this week is AI separation of stems from stereo recordings. Have you heard about this?
No,
Right. So
no.
there's a couple of companies do it. Or Izotope RX, just on the topic of Izotope, I got their bundle about 2 years ago. But it's one of those things that every program's so comprehensive, it maybe takes you like 4 or 5 months to get into what the program actually does properly. So I finally got round to kind of really learning RX, and RX is a fantastic piece of software. It's used to remove noise. It's used to correct audio. It's a really top end cinema standard noise plugin that makes things sound much cleaner and much more ready to go. There's a feature in it because it's called Music Rebalance, and I think they've actually imported that to the new Izotope Ozone 9. And in Music
Yes.
Rebalance,
Yeah.
you can turn the vocal up a bit, or turn the bass down a bit, or take the drums out. In RX7, you can turn those all off, which is actually you can make acapellas then from stereo recordings where you can turn in their sounds. And there's all sorts of digital artifacts that come off this because the technology is still fairly new. But embedded in a mix, it's hard to tell that it's been processed in that way. Sometimes it gets it better than other times, mind you. But Izotope are the only ones to do this. I have another piece of software called Regroover. I can't remember who Regroover's by. I'll put it in the link. But Regroover lets you do the same thing with loops. So if you have a drum loop, you can rebalance the elements in the loop. So you can maybe turn the shaker down, turn the kick up, or turn the snare up, or make the clap less bright, or not less bright, sorry, less loud. You can turn the volume up and down. And you can do that from within the stereo channel. RX lets you do it on the whole stereo recording. So if you have a recording from the 60s, let's say a Motown song, and you wanted to take the drums and the bass off it, you could do that and isolate the vocal. And my instant thinking for that was just getting hip hop samples is going to be outstanding.
Yeah.
Also, websites
I
now that
think
do the same thing. There's a website called Moses, I think it's called.
Because I've seen that being mentioned around, and that's what I was going to say is where's the practical examples of where that could be used in the future. But as you said, it's probably going to be extensively used for, sort of really rare songs from the past to be remastered,
Yes.
to be remixed. And
Yes.
then, as you said, for sampling, it is going to be a game changer as well.
Yes. So if you have if you've got an arcade recording, even if you've got an old mix from a hard drive that died years ago, but you managed to salvage some sort of data recovery, and you didn't get the project, but you've got the 2-track with the stereo bounce, and you realise that those drums are too quiet, or that bass is too loud, or you can hardly hear that vocal, you can go in and this gives you tweaks now. In all honesty, you get about 2 to 4 decibels of difference, and that is a big change within a stereo recording. After that, then anything more or less than that, though, starts to give you artifacts that are especially noticeable. But there's a lot of application for even pulling things apart. So what you can actually do as well on that Moses website, when you log in your edge there, you upload the sound, it splits it, and then it lets you download each of the stems, so you can then rebalance it independently too, and you can process each of the channels independently. But each of the channels always sound like there's always, the only thing I can describe it is digital ghosting, where you hear glitches and stuff in the background where there's other audio information. It's a bit like bleed, when you hear bleed coming in through microphones, which is just sound that the microphone's picking up that it isn't pointed at. So it's those kind of frequency glitchy bits that are so close to the original sound source that you can't really get rid of them. Now, embedded into the mix again, they're not an issue, but if you use them in isolation, they're very, very obvious. But it's a fun thing to kind of look at and to go in and to experiment with and see how you can pull tools. There's also a Max for Live device for anybody who's using the suite version of Ableton that does the same thing, where you open it up and put it onto a track, and that will split it into independent stems for you too. So that's massive in the world of remixing or sampling. Or really what I wanted to do is steal drum grooves, and I don't know how much you're aware of that, but we in Ableton and in most music software these days, you can load in a drum file, and then using the timing and the volume, you can take the groove, which is the velocity, how hard the instruments hit, according to how loud it is and when it's headed along the grid. So if it's ahead of the grid, it's kind of feeling rushed, and if it's behind the grid, it's feeling lazy, and you can get a kind of a swing from that. And I was thinking by taking these drum grooves, we can isolating those tracks, we can get a more clear drum groove to then apply on the MIDI program stuff to make it feel more natural.
That'd be cool. That'd be
So
really cool. Give a bit of more of a human sort of feel to
yeah,
like electronic music and stuff as
yeah,
well.
100%.
That'd be
That's the
brilliant.
thing.
It reminds me of like um when I was younger, like trying to isolate vocals when you couldn't get stems
Right.
from tracks, and you're trying to get the acapella versions of
Yeah.
songs to put over the top of your dubstep tracks. Like,
do you know about the reverse phase trick?
That's what I was going to say. So you used to load it up in Audacity, try and reverse the phase and stuff, try and get the vocals out, and it was never worked properly for me. I always just gave up. But I would have loved having a piece of software like that to be able to completely rip the vocals out.
Well, it does it in the same way that reverse phase thing does, and that's what I think it is. It's a very sophisticated way of doing that. So if you've heard it done wrong, it has that kind of glitchy, grainy quality that sounds a wee bit rubbish. It's kind of the same idea. But still, I mean, it's enough if you're doing a remix, or if you're doing something for the crack, or if you're doing something purely for the sport of it. Taking that acapella at that quality might be a big deal. I mean, I remember a Kate and Andrew remix of Pharrell Williams' Happy. It was a real kind of bumpy, glitchy, electronic, wobbly thing. And it was such a lovely remix, but he had clearly done the reverse thing and ripped that vocal himself and threw it over the top of it, and it was an interesting enough remix that you could play it because people knew it, but it was still weird enough that it wasn't popping, so you could play it in circumstances where there's a song that people know, but that's not necessarily a top 40 song that you're playing to people. But the quality of the vocal on it was less than ideal, let's say. So there's lots of things, but which brings me to the next point, Sean. Software. There's stacks of software going for free at the minute. Loads and loads and loads of stuff. Are you familiar with Valhalla?
I am. I would use the Valhalla reverbs. I think who out there isn't like making use of the vintage reverbs and stuff from Valhalla. They're unbelievable. Probably the top of the game at the minute in terms of reverbs.
I can't remember the last time I turned the Valhalla plugin on and didn't think, oof, that's it, money. They've got 3 free plugins going on at the minute, and we'll put the links below. But the first one is their freak delay, which has been free for a long time, but it's still absolutely outstanding. You put the source in, you can repitch that, and then you can delay the pitches. Absolutely fantastic. Wonderful for automating and getting weird sounds. Supermassive is their new reverb. Now, I downloaded Supermassive as soon as I heard of it, but I actually haven't had a minute to get in it and get experimenting with it. I extensively use Valhalla Room for everything, for plates and for rooms, obviously. But it's always on my auto load. And then they have a new one again called Space Modulator, which is a fancy flanger plugin, which I've just downloaded before we started this conversation, so I'm looking forward to playing with that too. But like you say, they're so clean and they're so contemporary sounding, and even the classic stuff is a really good representation of that feeling without it getting too noisy or grainy or cost a lot of money. I think that they're $50 each to buy, which is, if I'm not mistaken, about say 40 quid thereabouts. And Focusrite, if you've any Focusrite gear, if you register with Focusrite, they do a monthly thing where they give you free software from their partners. Did you know about this?
No, hadn't heard about that. No.
Are you using a Focusrite sound card?
No, I using a Kai sound card.
Oh, is it a big red one? Did I get that confused? Yes, so if you've got, I have a Liquid Mix, which is a external DSP software that has sampled hardware in it, and I registered that, and every month then they send you updates, but they're constantly sending stuff where it's their partners, they'll send you an email to say you can go and use this discount code and get the money off this piece of software and download it for free. They're doing loads of stuff like that at the minute. Obviously, this is being recorded just after the 4th of July weekend. There was all sorts of sales on plugins over the weekend too, and I know that pluginboutique.com are doing a Reason Lite. If you buy anything from the shop, you get Reason Lite for free. They've previously also give away like Izotope Ozone 9 Lite for free too if you buy anything, and it can be like a sample pack or it can be a plugin. But I did see that Dan Seacroft from the Northern Ireland Audio Forum had posted up about a tape machine that was like $7 or something that he was raving about as a JST plugin, and he said like if you buy that you get Reason free, so you can do plugins there for £7, like $7, not even £7. And Reason, of course, is a whole doll in itself. It's a fantastic piece of software now. Anything else that you've came across during lockdown that's of notable mention?
Well, anyone listening aware as well of all the Polyverse stuff. They have a few free plugins on there. I've been using that Wader plugin. It's just sort of like a stereo imager.
Yep.
And just makes just a quick plugin to sort of separate things out. Obviously, there's a lot of ones. You'll obviously have a stereo imager in your stock plugin bundle as well, but that's what people. It does the same job for the most part, but I've been using Polyverse's Wader because it just sort of seems to has a nice UI, and it's quick to stick on. And I find it like with other ones, you're trying to. The only thing I would say is that in other stereo imagers, you get more options in terms of like making a Wader for higher frequencies, and which I commonly do. But if you're just looking something quick, maybe to stick on the vocals, or then, and you don't want to get into changing how wide certain frequencies are and stuff like that, then you can't go wrong with a free plugin.
Not to make it the Izotope show, but Izotope also do Imager for free, Imager 2.
That's right,
it's very, very good for making the same thing. I suppose then we should really start into the show then, Sean.
I know.
What about your what have you been working on this week?
The last few weeks or so, I haven't been that busy, partly because of football's back on, and partly because I've been a bit lazy the last few weeks. But I have been mixing up and trying to finish up a few projects. And last Wednesday there, for the first time in a few weeks, I recorded something new. And then apart from that, I had been working on a set because I'm starting to, with some of the bands I'm in, we're starting to get ready to do live stream gigs and stuff. We've done one there last Thursday, and so there was a wee bit of time put into putting sets together and practicing stuff again because I hadn't been at it for the last couple of months. So it was rough, but most of it, as it says, most of the times just sort of gone into practicing. But a wee bit of audio work going in here and there. What about you?
I've been quite busy. I'm sure I've told you before, our house is now up for sale again. Well, it never came off for sale again, but lockdown happened the Monday after our house went on. So we're now trying to accommodate house viewings and go and see potential houses to buy. So it's a bit like a circus. So that's been kind of keeping me busy. It's one of the things actually that we'll talk about later on, things that we're overcoming. But what I'm working on is I'm doing a whole lot of one-to-one stuff with the Given Hands clients. And I seen a really nice comment from one of the clients randomly on the Ableton forum the other day. I just saying about, no, actually one-to-one's worked out for me because YouTube, like if you can learn from YouTube, fair play, but there's nothing like the structure and conversation and being able to ask a question. And I thought that was entirely unprompted and it was a really lovely way to put it, and I couldn't have articulated that in the same way. So I've been doing a lot of that stuff. A wee bit at the expense of my own writing, in all honesty, because I just haven't had the mental resource. When you're doing a 2-hour one-to-one session and you're giving your all to help someone else's skill development, but at the end of that you're drained. You're not going to sit down and start writing music then. So I've been trying to come up with a new way of working where I can sit down, make sure that I've met some targets that day, and then get on with the rest of the day. So I'm trying this, is it Pomodoro? Is that how you pronounce that technique? Where you have a very limited amount of time. You go in, you've got a lists the stuff to do in that time, and you kind of race through it to get it done. And I'm
Yeah.
using this technique to try and reanimate some old tracks, because if I'm not having time to sit down and be creative and come up with something new, I want to be maintaining that cycle even during all the chaos that's going on at the minute, so that my own artistic output doesn't suffer because of work commitments that way. So that's been very, very much fun.
It's interesting that you mentioned about the productivities type of thing, because I've got into the thing of trying to create habits for myself
Yep.
and trying to use sort of external help for that. So I've downloaded a wee app called Todoist, at the same time as being a to-do list for like general stuff like turn the sprinkler on and you have to wash the dishes. I can also put things on it that I want to get done every day,
Yep.
or every week, or every month, or on the 5th Tuesday of the month, or whatever.
Right. Yes.
So I've been able to put things on that, like, pick up the guitar every day, and every Sunday try and make time to work on a project,
Yep.
whether mixing something or trying to record something new. So that has sort of, and I open that up when I wake up in the mornings and see, oh right, I've said to myself I want to, or even like if I'll put it into my own personal calendar. Then if someone says to me, are you free to do this on Sunday? I go, I was meant to make some time to mix. So no, I'm not. So and sort of just it makes sure that I'm leaving time for the habits that I want to filter into life.
You make a fantastic point there, and it's about treating your commitment and your skill development like a meeting, like an appointment, because it's
Yeah.
very easy to neglect that time and say, I'm free, I can do that, I can put off what I have planned and do that. But if you make what you need to do, your skill development, a priority, then you'll definitely feel more like you're rewarded, not even rewarding yourself, but you're actually developing in your skill, which will give you more motivation to do it again.
Yeah.
I've been doing the same. Obviously, when I get up, first as soon as I get up in the morning, I get my daughter, and then I have childcare responsibilities until thereabouts midday. So we're kind of trying to do stuff during having the daughter is not very practical ever, and anyone who's ever had a toddler will know that. Thankfully, we're not having to do homework at the minute or schoolwork, but I'm getting very good at building my blocks. So as soon as I get up, the first thing I need to do then is kind of work out what I need to get done for the day, and then make sure that any time I can carve out is as productive as possible. So that's where that Pomodoro technique comes in, because I only have 20 minutes, and if there's an idea that I need to work on, I can do that. So this week I've been breaking that down into tasks. Well, instead of sitting down and trying to write an entire track in 20 minutes, that's not practical. So I spent one day organizing some drum sounds, and the next day organizing some percussion sounds, and then the next day organizing some synths. And then at the end of that week, then I was going in with a template already set up of stuff that I could jam out. And then for the past 2 weeks, I've been jamming out kind of ideas. And then this week I decided, well, I'm still not getting the full idea out in that time, so I'm going to spend each 20-minute session then just working on getting the drum groove going, and then the next one I'll make some pad sounds, the next one I'll do some vocal work, so I have raw materials to go in, almost like create my own loops, so I can go in and start patching these things together in 20 minutes that from a stronger source material than half getting ideas out. And it's really just down to the circumstances. I don't have the time to be, I don't have as much creative time now, so I need to kind of ripple effect it as I go. But it's actually working out quite well, and it makes you feel like you're productive. The biggest thing, though, I can probably stress in all of the productivity things is notepads. Notepads, 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 notepads. So you're using your to-do list, but I'll flash this up very quickly. These are my thoughts, and if I carry them thoughts with me, I forget everything, and I'm all sorts of scattered, and I need to write everything down just so that I keep on track of what I'm doing. Otherwise, it just goes to absolute pot. So the scheduling stuff out, writing down at the start of the day everything I need to do, giving everything a time limit, and then trying to get through as quickly as possible is generally how I'm living at the minute. What have you been overcoming this week, Sean?
Well, something I'll say something that I've helped someone overcome, and this will be sort of my top tip for for people. So I had a friend who is just sort of starting to get into audio recording. Text me during the week there because they just got an interface off Amazon, and we're trying to record their bass, and they were trying to record it into the laptop, and we were finding that there was a latency delay.
Mm-hmm.
So just for anyone trying to first set up an interface or first set up for audio recording and are experiencing some delays, whether it's on a MIDI keyboard or that if you're just recording off a mic or you're plugging straight into your interface and you're getting some sort of delay when you're recording it. There's a couple of different ways to tackle it. In his case, the problem was that he was trying to record with Bluetooth headphones on.
Uh-huh.
And I realized afterwards that the time delay between the audio coming from in the interface and then from the laptop connecting over Bluetooth to the headphones was causing the delay. So always record with wired headphones if you are using headphones, or with speakers in the house. And the other instances where I've seen that happen as well is when people are using to have a buffer speed as well.
Yep.
Obviously increases the latency of obviously has better sound quality and stuff like that. But while recording, you can switch that back on your audio preferences on whatever DAW you're using. Just go low, whether it's 64. Put it down to 64 just for recording, and then you can push that back up again when you're trying to actually mix that back.
Is that
and also try
tech tip video to come?
That could be a tech tip video, yeah. But I'll just finish the point for now and say that also if you're trying to put too many CPU heavy plugins on while you're recording and have a lot of tracks running with those plugins as well, it's going to give you a bit of latency too. So you might need to turn those off and put the buffer speed down before you go to record, and then you can just switch them back on again when you go to listen back. So
yes, great tip.
That's my wee tip.
Great tip. There is also on some interfaces a playback and direct sound source mix balance. So on my Moto, which is actually packed away at the minute, there you can listen up to 4 inputs at any one time. They've all got their own headphone controls, so that's direct on the way in, so that you don't get any latency. We have smaller cards that we used to use now, so I've actually got one sitting about. Let me go and grab it 1 second. Okay, so these are Lexicon Alpha cards, are like 50 quid on Amazon, if that. And this bit here, let me hold it up too. Can you see that very well? So we have this bit here, which is our monitor mix, and at the bottom here, I might need to flip my screen, but it says playback and direct. And if it's on playback mode, then that's the sound coming directly from the computer. So if you're listening through the computer, you're always going to hear a latency. If it's on it's on playback mode. If it's on direct, then that's the sound coming directly into the sound card, so you're less likely to hear latency then, because you're hearing exactly what's coming in on the way in. Where that is playback coming from the computer, it's going through the computer, and it's obviously being recorded and processed before it gets back to you, so there's always going to be a delay on that. And I always found when I was starting recording that was probably the thing that was tripping me up most, and it was very uncertain for me as to what that did. So direct is sound on the way in, and playback is sound coming from the computer. Some sound cards might have a different name from it, but it's essentially the same thing there. So overcoming for you is the playback. For me, it's the having to set up and break down the studio every time I need to do some work and keeping consistent with it. But we already spoke about the Pomodoro technique, and that would be my top tip, whether it be your to-do list app or just the idea of setting yourself time allocated tasks. It's the quickest way to maintain a focus. And I've been using this technique to reanimate old tracks, purely because, as I say, I don't have as much time to get new ideas out, so I want to make sure that the work I'm doing is consistent, that either the songwriting stage or the mixing stage or the finishing stage. And I did notice when I was going back into some of these tracks that I was reviewing them, and then sometimes I was reimagining them or I was changing them purely because I listened and assessed and thought, well, the sounds aren't good enough there, or this needs a bit of work, or it needs a new lead sound, or the vocals being used in it aren't working. And sometimes I was kind of reworking the track in that respect, which was against the idea of what I was doing when I was going in to finish them, where instead of reducing my options and getting to a finish point. I was actually increasing my options and thinking that I can continue to add more to these things. And I had to quickly catch myself on and realize that's not the remit of what we're doing here. We're going into finish. And I think that might be something that, as a songwriter, when you're new to constructing tracks, that you don't know when to stop. And I think that's a real lesson to be learned as you're developing. How do you deal with that?
Yeah, it's a meme like that you see in all those studio meme pages and stuff, that it's like okay, we're just going in to record a folk track here, and it's like 2 hours into the into the mix later, and you've got like a full orchestra and a brass section, synth pads and everything over the top of it. Yeah, I suppose it's hard to say hi to combat that. It's just to sit and think, what does this actually need, rather than looking down all your virtual instruments and all the possible instruments that you could record and all the different parts and harmonies and stuff, and not to look at them and think, what could I add, but to listen and say, what does it need, is the most important thing I find. I actually think what's best is actually giving the track to someone else, or letting someone else listen to it and say, what do you think's missing here? Because very often then someone will say, the chorus is a bit dry, it could need a harmony there, or it needs a few more voices, or that it gets a bit boring in that middle late, so then maybe you can ease in a bit more instrumentation, or that the song opens a bit cold, so make it a bit more impactful, give it more of a bang, or just that it's not that interesting, so maybe you do put like a wee pad underneath, something real subtle, underneath the chorus bit or something like that. So getting that feedback is a way that helps me get over that. Or sometimes if let's say the last chorus or something isn't really hitting any different than the other two, then you have a wee raise that, and somebody from the band might say that to me, and so then I'll put a wee raiser in just before the last chorus, and then all of a sudden it feels completely different.
Yeah.
There's a lift.
One of the things that I always kind of encourage people, especially people who aren't used to finishing songs, is that you don't have to like it to finish it. And it's much easier to give that advice than it is to take it. And it's the idea that, okay, so this song is at 80% and I can go on and I can completely rework it, but then it's a different song. And just because I'm not particularly fond of it at the minute doesn't mean that it shouldn't be finished, because there's songs I've heard that I've completely fell in love with, or I've either spent too much time on them, or the idea is just no longer exciting, and I haven't heard it maybe a year and a half, and it accidentally comes on, or I play it forgetting what it is, and I play it back and think, actually all that needs is the hi-hat turned down, the bass turned up, and that track's finished. And I'm in a different complete headspace from it now, and I appreciate the tune just from having distance for it. So it's that kind of, just finish it, just do what's on your list in the allocated time and have it finished. That's you finished. Just leave it, and then come back to it at a different time where you're not so emotionally involved in it.
That's an interesting discussion in itself there, because I had this talk with someone recently where I was saying, what's the balance there between giving the track some love, and then knowing when to finish a song as well.
Right.
I tend to leave songs for months and months and go, I'll add a wee bit here and then forget about it, come back and add a bit more until I completely get bored with it. But I'm really trying to finish it. So I wish at some stage there I would be able to just go, you know what, I'm happy enough with where it is now. Let's put it out. It's about 60% done, but it'll do.
Yes.
I'm bored with it already. So where do you like sort of draw the line, or where do you balance it?
I think because you straddle both sides of the console, that you're always going to be in that no man's land, in that purgatory. So I think traditionally, in an artist sense anyway, if you were turning up to record an album or even an EP at a studio, you would have written a bunch of songs already before you ever get in the doors of that place anyway, because you wanted to maximise your time. So you already had a bunch of sketches already laid out. So it was about which songs were the strongest to record, which ones had the most merit. And I think that's the more you write, the better you'll get. Or, I mean, frequency as in repetition. The more you do something, the more you do it, the more likelihood you'll get a better one. And point in case, like your first 10 songs you'll have a right are absolute tripe, but then number 11 maybe halfway decent enough to make you think number 12 was adventure. But you get to number 100, you're like, I have a couple of songs out that I actually like. A year later you'll hate them all again because you're technically better at everything. So the more you do, the better you'll get, and it's more likely you'll happen across a good one when you're writing more. So I think your friend's technique of writing it to the point where it has an identity and then moving on sweet, because in generating that much ideas you can only get better ideas from it, and your technique and your ability to finish is what's being practiced there. And that's one of the big things. Actually, it was 2 weeks ago I was working with a client, and I was explaining to him that everybody can start a song and everybody can make changes to noise and everybody can do a kind of a mix to get to an approximation, but no one really stresses how important it is to actually finish, because you don't get better at finishing unless you finish time and time and time again. So it's that finishing bit that's very difficult for people, I find, and it's that collapsing the options that I was kind of re-investigating this week of, I could change the song in 100 different ways, but I don't want to change it, I want to finish it, and I had to limit my options in order to do that then. And of course at that point when I was bringing in the reference tracks to mix it, I hadn't used the reference tracks I was using at the beginning of the track, so my sound source was different, the samples I had chosen were different, it was in a different key. So all these things, it was me rediscovering, well, how would I do this? How would I take it from obscurity, essentially seeing the song for the first time, and make it finished without making it different? Does that make sense with a bunch of words?
Yeah. No. I think sitting in the producer seat, you always think the song you're working on is going to be your masterpiece.
Yes.
And you think that way up until the time when it doesn't. And that happens every time. So I think it's just about knowing when a project should be done and when to sort of just chop it off, and just as you said, working on that skill of being able to go, what steps do I need to take here quickly to get to the end point as soon as possible, not make the journey any loger.
Yeah,
we're not running a marathon with it. I think we're trying to get to the shop to buy some bread and come back again.
We don't need to go around the city to go to the shop. Like, I suppose the idea there is limiting your options. You know, what does this track need to finish is probably better than what does this need, because what does this need still makes me think I can add so much. Where if I think what does this need to be finished, then there's a different way. There's a different approach to me thinking there, where it's like, how do I close down the options? What's not working? What things need fixed? That's what needs to be finished. That's all it takes, and then that song's done. And it's about, sometimes when you get to the end of a project, you always hover around the last 80%, and then a combination of doubt and boredom and wanting to start something new, or inspiration for something else creeps in, and all of a sudden your vision for what this is drops in priority. So it's about practicing that finishing technique for me. That's the thing that I'm kind of working through this week, especially in all these changes of circumstances where I'm having to work either in headphones or set up a speaker temporarily, or work on different speaker sets, or work in different locations. But the real reward from this, even though it's a bit of hardship, is being able to deliver consistency and work consistently, and use my tools to make sure that my metering right and to make sure that my referencing right, and having like Sonar works on my headphones and on all the speakers too means that there's always an element of consistency. So I'm very fortunate to be able to work in those scenarios, and I suppose that's part of, you know, having that backup in place, where if you need to deliver, how do you make sure you're delivered, and how do you make sure you can continue to work? But that's a whole different podcast conversation, I think. What's inspiring you this week then?
I'll say Liverpool win the league.
Slip that in there, didn't you?
Why not?
Yeah.
That's given me motivation. What about you?
I was born in the Liverpool kit. When I was old enough to be taken out by my grandparents, the first thing they did was take me shopping and buy me a Liverpool kit and brought me home in the Liverpool kit. So it's almost like a religion, where, you know, you're born into it. You don't really have a choice. But in my teenage years, I realised the less attention I played to Liverpool, the more successful they were. So, you know, as a fan, I just don't engage.
Yeah. So you had to take one for the team and just take a step back.
not paying any attention for years now. Now they've won the league. They seem to be working out for it. But no, there's a
Won't
few
be watching
things.
any more matches, Craig.
No. Only watching any games now. Hey! There's a few things that have been inspiring me this week. So lockdown changes are happening, which inspires me and makes me quite nervous too. I think I'm now institutionalized into working from home and being within these walls and only having like 1 hour walk a day, and I've got kind of mentally used to that. Going back into the workplace is going to seem a wee bit strange, and then preparing AMPS for recording guests and for people coming in and for accessing the building and to make sure that makes sense. There's a whole kind of to-do list of things that need to be worked through and addressed, and then there's also government guidelines that need to be adhered to and making sure that everybody stays safe. So all that's kind of to come. Probably the next podcast is going to be about how we do that again, how we bring the public back into the recording space. But the things that have been exciting me is we went out for a pint on Friday night. We were out viewing houses, and on the way back, our house was being viewed. So we stopped in and got some dinner, and I had a pint of Guinness for the first 10, 12 weeks. Yeah. It was delicious, so I had to have a second, Sean. And the next thing then is the opportunity, this sounds so vain, to get a haircut. I cannot wait to get my haircut. But just being out in public and restaurants being open, and then now starting to think about, well, how do you go about getting gigs again, and how's the landscape changed, and who's booking, and how we're going to go about doing that, and all the uncertainties that are surrounding that. But the fact that things are moving forward is optimistic in itself. I have been working in collab with Kevin Moorland, who won the AVA mixed competition last year. She also had a BBC Lockdown broadcast over the weekend there too. We've just finished the first track working together, and it sent it to her about a week ago. And I was like, right, leave that for a while and then listen back to it, and then that way you'll have forgot about it enough that if anything jumps out that needs fixed, you send me a message and we'll review that again. And she just get back to me the other day, says, no, listen to that again. Everything sounds Buff Daddy. Buff Daddy. That's obviously not the collab name. So we're going to be sorting that stuff out as Buff Daddy, which entertains me greatly. And speaking of stuff getting out, there's been a few people on my Facebook page and a few people that I know who have been actually making a fair bit of success through radio plays and stuff. So big shout out to Richie Blacker, who's been a long time hard grafting DJ who's been playing kind of proper house music and progressive house music for years and years. He's been releasing on really high profile labels. He's been releasing with Sash, he's been releasing with Scream, and on the weekend there he got 2 Radio 1 plays back to back on 2 different shows. Awesome. So outstanding work by Richie there. And a whole host of people who are claiming up the Beatport charts. Shout out to Stevie Garrett as well. I think he had 3 in the top 100 there last week, if I'm not mistaken, on 3 different releases. Loads of people who are actually grafting, putting stuff out and making moves, and loads of people as well in scenes that I'm not involved with through different audio groups on Facebook. I'm seeing that are streaming to Argentina and are doing mashups and getting picked up by big DJs, and there's a lot of creativity going on during lockdown from our wee part of the world that's going out then to a wider place, and that's very inspiring to see people being successful that way. I love seeing people achieve that. Anything else you want to add to that?
Yeah, I suppose in terms of the scene and stuff and being inspirational, I think there's been a lot of brave people that I've noticed in the Belfast scene anyway, who have came up and spoke up about abuse that they've sort of and that they've encountered, either a part of the scene or somehow connected, and I know that will have taken a lot of guts and a lot of bravery for them to come out and say that, and the potential backlash that could have potentially came from that. So just want to say well done to all those who want to sort of strive to make the scene and just gigs in general more accessible to everybody. Sure. So well done to everyone who who did come out and share their stories.
Well, I suppose we should thank everyone for staying with us to the end.
Yeah.
You can get us on the usual spots on YouTube, on Spotify, on your Apple streaming service, or any other streaming service for that matter. We're on SoundCloud too. And if you've any technical questions, or if you've anything that you want us to discuss on future episodes, then by all means let us know. I'll hand you over to Sean this week for this month's tech tip. And we will see you then after July.
Hi folks, Sean here, and this is going to be a quick wee instructional video on audio latency, and this is for anyone who is really just getting into audio recording and maybe setting up their home studio for the first time. It comes off the back of some of my friends and clients and stuff have been on to me over lockdown. They might have just ordered their first interface, and I've had a few issues setting that up. One of them that keeps coming up is audio latency. So I'm going to run you through some of the tips I've been giving them to try and combat that, because it is a real issue, you know. When you're trying to record, especially if you're performing something, singing, playing guitar, whatever, if you've got a MIDI keyboard, you know, if you're playing something and you're hearing it back a few milliseconds later, it's going to really dampen the performance. It's almost unplayable, you know, to try and keep in time, and it's just really distracting as well. So I'm going to try and help you to eliminate that from your process. So the first tip I'm going to say is that some of my friends have been trying to set up their recording by, you know, plugging the interface into the computer, but they have been setting the output to some sort of Bluetooth device, whether it's like their AirPods or a pair of wireless headphones or a wireless speaker or something. And that might be alright if you're just listening back to a track. Maybe you're just, you know, you've got everything inputted on a piano roll and you're just hearing it back and you don't mind if there's a delay. But if you're trying to record something and the input noise is giving you some sort of delay or latency issue, then ditch the Bluetooth device. Just plug in a set of wired headphones. Wired monitors would be the best bet for you. But yeah, that helped one of my friends get his latency gone, and seems real obvious, but that's the first one anyway for you. I would say keep your device, your computer, clean as much as possible. So if you're using an older device and it can't handle the processing power of the audio, then, you know, don't know what to say to you, but it mightn't be up for the task. But most modern computers should be able to handle most DAWs and their processes, so and shouldn't be giving you too much latency issues. So if you have a modern device and it's still running slow, it could be just that it's bunged up, it's got a lot of junk in it, and you just need to optimize the computer, clear out any unwanted stuff, clear out any unused software and stuff like that. And I'm sure for our people getting into studio record and stuff like that, that's going to be a hard task, because all you want to do is record or install new software and stuff like that. But it really affects the performance of the computer and could affect that audio latency. Next up, we're going to talk about buffer speed, because this is one that I would fix myself every now and then. I go between different buffer speeds, whether I'm mixing or recording. For me, and this doesn't really affect my performance, I've been setting my buffer size to 64 when I'm tracking. So 64 samples, and that allows me to have a 7.6 millisecond output at a 10.5 millisecond round trip it takes for my audio to process and get to my ears. But 64 seems sweet for me, and I've been able to play along with it fine enough. You can't just bump that up to 256, 512, whatever, once you go back to mixing and you're not tracking anything anymore. But you'll see as I change this, go up to 1024 here, it's going to be a 54 millisecond round trip to process your audio in that case, which is going to be more than half a second, which will definitely put you off while recording. So that's the second one. And by the way, you can find that in your audio preferences on whatever DAW you're using. The last thing I'm going to mention is plugins and stuff, because we can always get pretty caught up in adding more and more effects to our chain when we are recording. And some people like to record their vocals with a bit of compression on the way in. They like to have some inline processing like reverb and stuff while they're recording, and that's fine. But if it is affecting latency, then more than likely that could be a source for that latency. So try taking out your reverb, taking off your compression, or there's some of those really big CPU heavy inputs and inserts and audio effects that are going to affect that processing speed and will cause latency. So you just have to turn them off and see if that affects it. And if it does, then you might have to just find some sort of alternative or have them turned off while you're recording. But hopefully they have fixed your audio latency issues, and feel free to drop us a comment or a message if there's anything else you discover along your journey that helps fix audio latency issues, and let us know if any of these helped as well. Thanks very much, folks, and I'll see you in the next podcast.